Hello and welcome to this special conversation on money control on the sidelines of the World Economic Forum right here at Davos. We're in conversation with Bob Moritz, the global chairman of PwC, and Sanjeev, who's the chairman of PwC India. And this is in fact a CEO survey that every delegate at the World Economic Forum looks forward to every year. And Bob, your survey, seems to have added to the doom gloom and that we are seeing all around. Your survey says 73% of CEOs around the world believe that the global economic growth will decline over 12 months. And I think what's more worrying is that, 40% of CEOs don't believe their organizations will be economically viable in 10 years if they do not transform. What's really driving this pessimism? Because economists we've been speaking to here are talking about a poly-crisis decade. So is that playing into your assumptions?
It's clear that the pessimism on the economy is driven by primarily two things. First, the macroeconomic environment that we're seeing, which is the result of, candidly, what we've done over the last couple of years when you think about fiscal and monetary policy issues, the issues of COVID, supply chain challenges and the like. So you're dealing with inflation, interest rates, and volatility in a big-time way. And that does result also then in potentially certain asset classes being negatively impacted. And you could look around commodities, housing, and for that matter, stock markets. The second thing that's important is the geopolitical uncertainty. And in the past few years, that was primarily a focus on China-US and the relationships over the last, call it 5-6 years. But it's much bigger than that. As we think about the role of the Middle East, particularly with energy now, the Russia-Ukraine issue being contained and whether it can be contained to just that, and equal as important, the elements of how organizations and countries are going to deal with some of these big macro issues. Because right now they're dealing with them on a fragmented basis. So all of this creates uncertainty, concern, and that pessimism. But to your point, the bigger thing is for CEOs, what can they control and what can they do? And the good news, not necessarily bad news, is 40% of them say, I have a challenge. I acknowledge the problem that will not exist 10 years from now if I don't change. The question now is, what change? And do you have the confidence to get that change done? The more pessimistic issue is 60% of the CEOs on the other side say it's not an issue. And we at PwC would say just the opposite. Everybody has to deal with this issue right now. So waking up to that concern is a big challenge for CEOs and management teams and supervisory boards right now.
Right. Interestingly, a couple of people I spoke to today said that, while the IMF is pretty pessimistic, WEF's economists are pessimistic. There is also a view that, things will get more benign. The public markets, are clearly behaving differently. China in the last 90 days, it's been doing well ever since they opened up. And people believe that the worst is over when it comes to technology stocks in the US. So do you think there could be positive surprises even amidst all the negativity that we are seeing on the macro front?
You have to remember that when we ask this question, it's a relative game. So yes, I do believe you'll see increase in the economy at a mid-single digit level relevant to China as they both come out of COVID and candidly change some of their monetary, fiscal, and economic policies relevant to the domestic agenda. The last 3 years have been extremely challenging in that regard. I also see a big opportunity in India in terms of, mid-tier, if not higher tier, single-digit growth when you look at the needs of that economy and how the world is reacting to the potential opportunity that exists today. You do see the same if the Middle East can continue to reform itself and be less energy dependent in terms of where it needs to go, because you'll fuel growth in the non-energy sectors in moving forward. And last but not least is, as the U.S. continues to play a role, we've banked on the resiliency of the U.S. economy. The consumer has generally been pretty good at being a resilient source of economic activity. The question is that going to continue, and if so, for how long? So yeah, I do think you see some good clouds that are less gray, and I think there's some opportunity, but it's going to be fragmented. It's not going to be great around the world, and that global picture hopefully has some more optimism than it does negative.
Right. What I also found interesting is the way CEOs in some economies, believe. I mean, I think the Indian CEOs, for instance, are more optimistic compared to their counterparts in the West. What do you think, Sanjeev, they are doing differently, or again, is it a function of the overall macro? The fact that India is seen as a bright spot, we're still growing at 6.9% when the IMF expects a third of the world to slip into recession. So is that giving them the confidence? Because we are actually seeing that play out at Davos. If you walk across the promenade, you can't you can't walk 10 steps without some Indian company. So is that all sort of playing out for them?
No, most certainly. I think the macro is really helping. I mean, if you look at our budgetary estimates, we are running ahead on most of them. So we'll hopefully be within range on fiscal deficit this year. We'll know in less than 3 weeks' time now. I think very clearly bank lending has gone up. We can see that the government of the day is actually saying that even the next year, they will continue to expand on capex, which is a good thing. So in some ways, I think the fact that the Indian macros are looking good now, you can attribute whatever reasons to it, right? The way we procured oil or whatever else. The fact of the matter is that Indian macros are looking well. The second part really is that if you look at India as a market, we have always been a big consumption market, and that stays. You heard just now. A lot of people saying that, okay, technology is something that we will not stop focusing on. Now, if US, Europe, and the rest of the world is continuing to focus on technology and transformation, we know that a lot of it gets delivered by India. So, which means that India's services sector, which is 55% already, comes back to 4. It is rock solid in some ways, right? And you could say there's some pressure on rates and so on and so forth, but it is rock solid. In fact, people want to do more of that, because people are talking about transformation, sustainable or otherwise, but it's only going to grow. So I think that gives us the confidence that it is going to grow. Then you look at manufacturing, which is where the government has actually been trying to say that, okay, I want, whether for import substitution reasons or indeed for saying that India should become, manufacturer to some parts of the world, if not the entire world. They have been giving a lot of subsidies and incentivization, etc., etc. You mentioned a bunch of states also are trying to do that. There is competitive federalism at this point in time. I think all that will make sure that there is job creation. There is equality, if I may say so, when the focus is there on manufacturing. So if this actually pans out, you're taking care of manufacturing, you're taking care of, our services growth, which is there. I mean, why would not India surprise in 2024, 2023, 24? And that's my hope. I mean, otherwise people say that if the global economy grows 3%, India cannot grow more than 5.5% because you can only have a 2.5% delta. I believe
that we need to grow by 6.
Well, I would say that, I think definitely we would grow more than 6% as things stand today. Yes, there is a black swan even tomorrow again, who knows? But I'm pretty sanguine that we will grow more than 6%.
If you look at India and its economy, there's 3 fundamental questions that have to be asked, answered, and actioned upon. First is, can India as a country capture the upside potential that it has in a world where it should have natural competitive advantages right now? And that 6%, the question is, can it be even more so?
China is the next manufacturer.
And it doesn't have to replace. It actually has to gain market share, but not replace entirely. So to be an alternative option. So the question really is, can it get 6% to be closer to double digit? That's question number 1. The second question, which we've seen in the past over the many decades, is a great promise. Does it have sustainability? Because there's too much variability where we go 8% one year and then we're down 1% the next year, or whatever it may be. And the third piece is, can that economic growth be much more inclusive to all of the citizens of the Indian economy and the country? This way it's beneficial, that sets a much more solid foundation for that long-term sustainability.
Right. And, again, people were banking on this China plus 1 factor. But if the China growth engine is coming back, do you think India will still be an attractive destination?
That's the opportunity India has right now. I see it. I believe it. We see it more, PwC more broadly. But let's not talk China plus 1. Let's talk China plus many, of which India should be one of the many. And that's the framing that India has to have. If you want to get your larger proportionate share of that, you've got to be cheaper, you got to be more effective and agile, you got to be able to scale, and you got to be cleaner. And that right now is the opportunity for India at a policy level and with the business community to serve the world with those 4 elements.
I'll just say one more thing. You don't win a game just because
Someone else is not doing well.
someone else is not doing well. We need to be able to do stuff which makes us stand on our own feet, and that's why I personally don't like this China plus one or Europe plus one kind of situations. Yes, we are doing a bunch of things, and I think they'll keep us in good stead.
Right. Final couple of questions. I found it counterintuitive. I think your survey said that CEOs are prioritizing climate goals, but at a time when survival itself is becoming difficult and they have to cut costs, don't you think climate goals, sustainability goals, will be one of the first overheads that they will look to cut down on?
I don't. First, when you think about this is to solve the simultaneous equation of the short term and the long term. Climate is going to make things more expensive, and climate will start to change consumer behaviors and even employees' behaviors. As a result, if you are not more climate friendly, you will not have employees, and the only way you're going to get them is to spend more money.
Right.
If you don't do that for your consumers, you're going to have to market more expense embedded in that marketing to overcome the presumption you are not climate friendly. So these short term and long term go very much together. The second thing I'm going to say here is that climate is lower in the risk rating profile because of the relativity, but in the medium to longer term, still on that list. And the last thing I would say is the amount of energy that CEOs globally are spending in this place is significant. They are working together with government. They are working across businesses and across their sectors, or maybe even within those sectors. And they're working with NGOs and the like to make this come to life and progress this very fast. And they're asking governments to make changes to policies and regulations to amplify and accelerate that change. So I don't think it's going to come at the expense. I think that change has already started to happen. The question is, how do you accelerate it? And the business case for this change has gotten actually harder because the amount of emissions just in the last year is at a record low in terms of reduction. In a time where we're coming out of COVID and supposedly learned a lot of lessons, our own PwC Net Zero survey would say it was one of the least years for reduction in emissions than we've had in the last 15. That's not a great sign, which says everyone around the world has to be more so focused on this.
Right. On that note, thank you very much for joining us on Moneycontrol, and hopefully companies will fare better than what we have in the survey today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.